All right, hello, friends. See, Gayatri has already said hello. As usual, we'll give it some time for people to come in. We'll see if the time change has affected people knowing what time Dhammapalooza starts, as it seems to have been the last 2 weeks. Hello, Pokil. I don't know how to pronounce that. I don't know if this is your name is not familiar. So unless you're part of our Discord or something like that, you must be brand new. And if so, I would like to welcome you. Hello, Cameron. Welcome. Ah, it's Douse. All right. How's audio and video? All good? Very good. All right. We'll give it another couple minutes, then we'll get started. All right. One more minute. Let's share screen. Get started with our chanting. Okay. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Aneka jati sangsarang santha visang anibisang kahakarakang gave santo dukkha jati puna punang kahakaraka ditto si punagehang nakahasi sabbate pasuka bagga gahakutang visangkitang visankara gatang chittang tanhanang kayang ajaka. All right, the next. Yaddahave patubhavanti dhamma atapino jayato brahmanasa athasa kanka vapayanti sabba yato pajanati sahetu dhammang Yaddahave patubhavanti dhamma atapino jayato brahmanasa attasakanka vapayanti sabba yato kayang pachayanang yavedi Yaddahave patubhavanti dhamma atapino jayato brahmanasa vidhupayang tittati marasenang suryova ubhaseyang antalikanti. English. Craving is the builder of this house. Through many a birth I wandered in samsara, seeking but not finding the builder of this house. Sorrowful it is to be born again and again. O house builder, thou art seen. Thou shalt build no house again. All thy rafters are broken, thy ridgepole is shattered. My mind has attained the unconditioned. Achieved is the end of craving. All doubts vanish. As phenomena grow clear to the Brahmin, ardent, absorbed, his doubts all vanish when he discerns what has a cause. As phenomena grow clear to the Brahmin, ardent, absorbed, his doubts all vanish when he penetrates the end of conditions. As phenomena grow clear to the Brahmin, ardent, absorbed, he stands routing the troops of Mara like the sun that illumines the sky. All right, friends. Hello, Gretchen. Good to see you on with us. So, friends, we are now beginning another. It's Monday night, so that means another Dhammapalooza, our festival of Dhamma, where the Maggasekha community comes together and does a variety of different Dhamma-related activities. Now, earlier, at least for the time being, starting at 7 instead of 8. We'll see how that goes and if I change it back. But there's a variety of reasons why I wanted to try and see if 7 works best. Mostly for my own energy and also for people who join us who are in Europe. There are always people who join us like Daus and like Metika and people who are in other countries. So I'm thinking maybe this might be better. I don't know. We'll have to see how it goes. But for the foreseeable future, until I say otherwise, we're going to try 7 o'clock and see how it goes. And so during Dhammapalooza, we do a variety of Dhamma-related activities. We just did some chanting. We'll do some meditation later. And what we do now, well, that depends on the community. As always, Dhammapalooza is guided by the community. It's not just that you come on and you listen to me talk for 2 hours and I come on with a prepared talk or a prepared statement, etc. This is not how Dhammapalooza goes. Now, what we will do for the next couple of minutes is I will give time in the chat. If you have a question you'd like me to answer, you can put the question in the chat. If you have a Dhamma topic you'd like me to give like a Dhamma talk about or discuss about, or if you'd like to have a topic the community to discuss, you can put that in the chat. And if nobody has anything, as always, I have suttas for us to read. So right now, we'll give it a few minutes. Hello, Dharma learner. Welcome. If you have questions related to Buddhism, meditation, about monastics, feel free to ask those questions. Cameron says, can you discuss the Eightfold Path more in depth? Do you happen to have Insight Timer? because the next 8 Saturdays I'm taking each one for each week and going through the in depth the different factors of the Noble Eightfold Path. But for right now, we can talk about what exactly kind of depth. Do you have any ideas of specifically what you'd want me to talk about? If not, I can just start talking about them in depth. But I wanted to see if have some clarification so I might know exactly what you're looking for. Oh, hello, Kristen. Good to see you. So I'm going to wait for Cameron to respond. I'll move on to Kristen's comment. How does one feel joy in the body? I was speaking with a spiritual friend, and she mentioned its importance in jhana development. As I feel neutral in the body in daily life. Depends on what you mean by joy. See, this is where things get confusing. What do you mean by joy? Now, what somebody might be doing. Hello, Ricky. Good to see you. What somebody might be doing is either using English for one of two Pali words, either for piti, which is usually translated as rapture, but some people do translate as joy, or for sukha, which sometimes is translated as joy, but it's really pleasantness or happiness. So, where your friend is coming from can make a difference in what the heck she's meaning. In terms of feeling, piti and sukha, these are qualities that arise from the practice as you get towards jhana. You can experience one or both of them outside of jhana. They're not just locked in to jhana. So there's jhana, which is very clearly defined in the suttas. And then there's what is called, in the commentaries is called, what do you call it? Access concentration. Or I think Bhante G has a better way he talks about it. He calls it jhanic quality concentration. And what this quality or what this experience is that you have pretty deep samadhi and you have parts of what make up jhana, but you're not in jhana, right? So you can feel piti and not be in jhana. But these are piti and sukha arising in the mind and the body arise based on first being secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states. Right? You are practicing some level of sense restraint, some level of seclusion from sense pleasures, the hindrances, etc., and then piti and sukha arise. So in this way, importance in jhana development, yeah, because it's part of jhana. But in terms of I need to get this so I can get into jhana, no, that's not how it works. These are qualities that arise. These are effects that arise due to the causes of you practicing mindfulness of breathing. So when you start to be secluded, you'll start to feel piti and sukha. Okay, so Cameron is back to asking me about right view and right thought and maybe right effort. Okay. So right view is what's important to understand about right view is that it's like most things in the path, it's a gradual development, right? The definition of right view is full and complete experiential understanding of the Four Noble Truths, i.e., you're an awakened being. So only awakened beings have full and complete right view. The rest of us are developing our right view as we follow the Noble Eightfold Path. It starts out just a little bit. I on the Insight Timer session on Saturday, I was talking about right view because we were talking about the fourth noble truth, which is Noble Eightfold Path, and I was talking a little bit about right view, and I was mentioning how that these now the few of us who are here, right? There's 12 people, maybe there's more, maybe there's less, because the YouTube numbers is never right. Can never really know how many people are actually watching live. But there's only a few of us. During my Insight Timers, there's like over 100 people that join in my session. Most of those people are not Buddhist. This is Insight Timers because they can come from the random parts of the internet listening to all kinds of random wackiness on Insight Timer. But they see a monk randomly that's live and they join. That's how we get 100 people join. It's like, I mean, I have like 3,000 followers and Insight Timer, but most of those, most of the people who join my Insight Timer sessions are just random people. They're not Buddhists. They don't, maybe they don't even probably subscribe to any Buddhist monks on Insight Timer, but they see a random monk and they join. They want to, because well, first of all, there's so few monastics on Insight Timer, but maybe it's something interesting. All right, they have a little bit of right view. What's the right view? Well, there's a good reputation for Buddhism. The Buddha has a good reputation. Now, of course, they don't know, like in the suttas, we hear that the Buddha has a good reputation. Iti piso bhagava arahang sam. No, they don't know any of that. But they just know that the Buddha, they hear that, oh, the Buddha is this wise being. Maybe we'll listen. Right? That's right view. It's a little bit of right view. It's not like full and complete right view, obviously, because they're not awakened, but it's right view. And karma, rebirth, all devas, all of these are part of right view too. But most of us who are Buddhist converts don't start out with a view of belief in those things. We might start out with a kind of antipathy or a strong aversion towards them. But as we practice and develop, that may change as our right view develops. So, right view, it's important to understand, is something that you are building, you are developing. If you look at the threefold division of the path, actually, I was just on with Bhante Saranapala and Bhikkhu Bodhi and Bhante Rahula. The every 2 weeks they do this. The monks get together on Bhante Saranapala's YouTube channel, and we were kind of just talking about this a little bit about kind of like right view and the development of the path and things like this. Right view is to be understood as something you gradually develop. That's the most important thing. I don't even remember. I something clicked in my mind to bring up what just happened, and I forgot. I lost it. I'm sure maybe it'll come back. But that's right view. Right view is full understanding of these things. Right thought, right intention. Hello, Visaka. Hello, Gautam and Bella. I see the questions. I'll get to them. So right thought, Samasankapo. Um, I think right intention is the better way of understanding this. Because if you know about thought, a good chunk of somebody's thought, an untrained person's thought, is random thought that has arisen, right? That comes into your mind that you fed in the past, but you weren't expecting, you didn't call it to come. It just showed up. So in the interest of like getting away from confusion, I think intention is the best. You're intending three things. Nekama sankampa, letting go. Your mindset is in everything. Let me practice letting go. How can I practice letting go? How can I practice letting go in this situation? How can I practice letting go in general? Do I need this as an attachment? Can I let this go? Having the mindset of letting go. An attitude, a mindset, a habit of letting go. That's right thought. Nekama. Usually translated as renunciation. And most people think when they hear that word monastic, right? But this is really about letting go. A mind that doesn't cling, a mind that's able to let go. Like that meme. It's so funny. So those of you who've been around long enough, you know that you've seen enough of the memes that, and one of those memes that is in my meme files is the Buddha. It says, "You need to let that s go, man." And my 18-year-old nephew, I saw him like a week ago, and he had a shirt with the same thing. The Buddha says, "Buddha, you have to let that s go, man." The Buddha. And it's like totally out of the blue. I couldn't believe that like somebody put it on a shirt or that my nephew actually had it. But this is the idea. This is the mindset. The mindset of letting go, letting go, letting go. Not attaching, not grasping, not clinging. Mostly because you start to see how doing all of that causes you suffering and is harmful to others. So you practice letting it go. I don't want to cling. I don't want to attach. So this is the mindset of letting go. And then the mindset of Abhyapada, goodwill, metta, practicing lots of metta, developing your mind, the framework, the perspective of goodwill for all beings without exception. And the third is Avihingsa, the framework of the basis, the basic first principle of wishing to not harm beings. So if you develop these intentions, these basic attitudes, these basic dispositions of not attaching, goodwill, and non harming, that is an amazing benefit to yourself and others in this life. Right? That is how you let go of your suffering. Right? That's a very important thing to understand. Right intention. And then right effort. Just checking the chat here. I see people have questions. I'm definitely getting to those. I know I'm kind of going a little bit in deep on these things, but these are good topics to go in deep on. It's a very important thing to understand. And so, right effort. Right effort is easy, easy to understand, hard to implement. Anything that is unskillful, anything that is harmful to yourself or others, abandon it. Whether it's a habit, thought, pattern, intention that you already have, or that's arising, abandon it. Don't feed it. Any habit, action, thought pattern, disposition, attitude, whatever that is good and skillful, feed it, develop it, make much of it, practice it. So you're abandoning what is unskillful, developing what is skillful. That's right effort. If your attitude, if you live day to day with that attitude, abandon the unskillful, develop the skillful. That's the whole other path of the parts of the Noble Eightfold Path is developing the skillful, abandoning the unskillful. So this is why the Buddha says right view, right mindfulness, and right effort run right around all the factors of the Noble Eightfold Path. It's kind of like the core three that build the ability to do the others in a way. All right. So, Gayatri has a question. I'm at a point in my practice where it feels like a standstill. Feel like there's not much point in rejoicing existence, and it's a very numb state of mind, not negative, low on fuel. Let me see, do you type anything else? Okay, so that's all you typed. I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't anything extra. So it's important to understand that you will have plateaus in your practice. You will have periods where you feel lost, where you don't necessarily know where to go from there. In those times, you have to go back to the basics. What are you doing? You're walking the path that leads to the ending of suffering. What is the path that leads to ending of suffering? The Noble Eightfold Path. So if you are following the Noble Eightfold Path, sincerely, honestly, dedicatedly to the best of your ability, you're moving forward. It might not seem, maybe you haven't had any like big insights or breakthroughs or anything for a while. But that's fine. That doesn't always happen. It could take years before you have that kind of another like breakthrough or big insight. But the Buddha says, I follow the Noble Eightfold Path, so I'm going to keep learning, keep developing, keep trying to practice the Noble Eightfold Path. Maybe there's aspects of it that I am missing out on, that I'm not doing, that I could be doing better. Let me focus on the Noble Eightfold Path. Let me focus on simply sitting down and following my breath. Let me focus on simply being mindful. Let me focus on dana, sila, right? Going back to the basics. That's very important. If you're trying to get lost in the mire, you're like, maybe I have to learn more deep esoteric Dhamma knowledge or whatever. After watch 30 videos on consciousness and Buddhism. Maybe, but probably not. Most likely, you'd be better off going back to the basics. And focusing on the basics. This is very important. Anybody who masters any kind of skill, it's like just like the martial, my own experience, like kind of like the Buddha. It's like I think of like sword fighting or shooting or anything or golf or something, like the basics, the beginning, that you don't like ever just, that doesn't go away. It's not like, okay, I've mastered the basics, now I never have to deal with them anymore. No, you have to keep doing the basics. Right? You keep the basics are there with you from the beginning all the way to the end. Right? So you think, well, I've mastered these other parts of the Noble Eightfold Path. I gotta work. No. You have to. You're doing the whole path all the way to the end. Right? So don't forget about basics, and don't feel bad that you have to go back to the basics. Right? Sometimes you have to go back to. It's like you're exploring the woods. You kind of get lost, or you're kind of afraid. You kind of get into these spots that are kind of a little tough. And maybe you have to go back. You have to go back home. You have to go back to base. You have to go back to your camp. Right? Go back to a place of safety and some kind of sanity and normalcy, and stay in there for a while. And then, your path can become clear. And you can say, oh, I'm going to follow that path. I'm going to follow this line of inquiry and go from there. And it's okay. It's good that you don't have to rejoice in existence. If you're going aversive towards existence, that's also not good. That's too far the opposite way. But if you have nibbida, if you have disenchantment and dispassion towards existence, that's good. That's part of the path that develops. Hello, Ian. Welcome. Dharma Learner, I think, has a question. I just saw Bhikkhu Bodhi asked during an interview about EBT, early Buddhist texts. Can you talk a little about how EBT can help a Western layperson like myself who is not following one of the three main traditions, Mahayana, Theravada, etc.? Well, the early Buddhist texts come from a time before traditions. So you don't really need to be a Theravada, I'm a Mahayana to follow the early texts. Right? The early texts kind of stand in their own accord. In both traditions, Theravada and Mahayana do things in the modern day that you look at the early texts and you're like, this doesn't really align with the early texts. I don't know what's going on with this. It seems a bit off. No, I see this all, even in the Vinaya. Even in the Vinaya, you just kind of, if you read the Vinaya, like all the nitty gritty, like the part that most monks don't read the Vinaya at all. But even the parts that most monks would never go to read, and you read like, wait a second, this is kind of not like how it is in modern day. This is just the nature of things, right? For a variety of different reasons. Partially of which it was in languages that only certain, only monastics could know, and it was not as important as the traditions developed. That doesn't mean that the traditions are wrong or bad or anything like that. What this does is, as somebody who's coming from outside of Buddhism, This allows us to have more options than I have to go to this Thai place, I have to go to the Sri Lankan place, I have to go to this Vietnamese place, I have to go to this, and then I have to adapt everything that this country Buddhism says to be Buddhist. Now, you don't have to do that. This is one of the blessings of being in a Western country and being a Buddhist convert, right? There's options. And for those of you who have the inclination, I've always had this inclination. This is part of me to go towards the earliest, towards the oldest, towards the closest. I had this inclination even in Christianity, growing up Catholic. Right? The original church, the Desert Fathers, right? Like before it became big and corrupt, because everything becomes big and corrupt. Governments, corporations, unions, trade, whatever, any organization that lasts long enough becomes big and corrupt. Religions, this is just the nature of how things are. And so I was always inclined towards like learning about like the early Christians, early Christendom, the martyrs and the Desert Fathers and the documents. And I was always inclined towards that, a feeling more of rightness and purity and closer, kind of like before the corruptions. And so when I looked into Buddhism, it was the same way. And I was like, oh, I hear this Theravada, this is the earliest. But then you look and the more you know, you realize, no, that's not true. I mean, is most of Theravada earlier than Mahayana? Possibly, but it's not that early. And the kind of generic thing of Theravada's older, Mahayana's younger is not exactly true. Right? It's much more shades of gray than that. And so if you have that inclination like I did, and you read this, and you're also inclined like I am towards practical, pragmatic, not esoteric teachings, then the suttas are for you. I mean, if you're very artsy and you like esoteric, maybe like Zen koans and things like that are more for you. That's not me. I'm not an artsy fartsy type person. I'm not an esoteric type person. I like practical, pragmatic. How do I put this into practice in this very life? And if you have those inclinations, then the early texts are for you. Because the Buddha is very clear in them, which goes against a lot of later teachings. I'm the teacher. I teach with an open palm, not a closed fist. Right? There's no special teachings. There's no hidden teachings that the Buddha gave to the devas that were taught later, like Abhidhamma, like Mahayana. There's if you read the early texts, the Buddha there's be no such thing as this, no such thing as that. If you're going by the Buddha of the early texts, you can tell that the Buddha would not, because he is an open palm teacher. He doesn't hide anything. There's no, you have to reach level 10 and then you'll learn the more super secret, the kind of like Gnostic view. Buddha is not Gnostic, right? Buddha is not like there's a hidden knowledge. No. Buddha is in the early text, Buddha is very straight. And so this is, how if you have inclinations like I do, then this might be something, that would be beneficial. Now, if you're kind of like have the Western perspective, like, oh, this like mystical, magical stuff and like and like merit and all these things and devas, this is all silly, this is all ritualistic, blah blah blah. Most of that, not all of it, but I mean devas, I mean that's all in the suttas. You don't like escape a lot of these things by reading the suttas. Um, you see that a lot of modern kind of ritualistic things like the chanting and house blessing and things like that is not something the Buddha appreciated or talked about or encouraged monastics to do things like that. But it's not like the suttas, the early texts are like the most rational and scientific and blah blah. Blah. No, no, no. I mean, so if you're looking for that, no. But the suttas can be very practical and pragmatic, and you can just read a sutta, and the Buddha gives you a technique, and you can put that technique right into practice right away. So, yeah, that's what I have to say about the early text, I suppose. Hello, Visaka. All right. Let's see here. Doubts has maybe a question, maybe a comment. A basic one with a twist. How one knows if he is being mindful versus not being mindful. And are there levels of it? For one can be a bit mindful or a lot. It can be a massive difference. So mindfulness, the quality of mindfulness is the quality that is remaining in the mode of like investigation and observance of what is happening. The split second you lose your mindfulness, usually what happens is you go into stories, narratives, and fantasies of the past, the future, other worlds, other countries, whatever. Like when you're lost in that, your mindfulness is gone. Anybody who's driven, especially long distances, you'll be familiar with this example. So, say you've driven, like I used to drive my 5 hours to Bhavana Society. I used to actually like take long road trips to a bunch of different places to visit friends in different states and things like that. But have you ever had the experience where you're driving and all of a sudden you're kind of like you're knocked into an awareness and you don't have any recollection of the last 15 miles that you drove? Right? You didn't fall asleep because you're still driving and you and other people are not dead. Right? You didn't fall asleep. This is not about falling asleep. But you kind of entered into this zoned out otherworldly state where the kind of like instinctual you was able to keep yourself on the road, but you were gone somewhere. You were somewhere else mentally. Right? That's what happens when you're sitting and following your breath. You're following your breath, or you're practicing satipatthana. I'm going to be mindful of the feeling or whatever. And then all of a sudden you're just gone. You're not there anymore. You're not with this mind and body. You're in some fantasy, some story, some narrative. Then it's pretty obvious you're not in mindfulness. You're not in sati. So I would say that's kind of at least one example of how you can know that you're not mindful. In many ways, if you have the thought, am I mindful? You're definitely at least not lost and wrapped up in in some fantasy or story at that point. At least you're kind of like questioning, am I mindful? That's a good sign that you're maybe at the very least close to being mindful. Did I say hello, Bella and Gautam? I don't know. I know I said hello, Visaka. I said hello, Ian. Let's see, Ricky. Did the doors of liberation, stylelessness, aimlessness, emptiness show up in the EBTs? Haven't seen any teachers cover them besides Thich Nhat Hanh. I think the concepts are not packaged together. Yeah, that I don't know anything about that packaging. I also don't know what aimlessness would be. Signlessness does appear a few times in a couple different contexts related, because so nimitta is sign, animita is signless, right? So it does appear a few times in the suttas. It's not like its own big meditation or anything like that. It's more of a descriptor than anything else. And emptiness, sunyata, does appear a few times in the suttas. It's not this big thing that you later see it as it is in Mahayana. It usually just simply means it's another word of saying anatta, not self. All right. Well, we've come to the end of the chat. I'll give it another minute or two. And then maybe we will read a sutta. The one I have is not a long one, so we could read a sutta and do our guided meditation as well, if we have reached the end of questions. It's good to see so much activity in talking with each other in the chat. It's the last month or so, a little bit more actually, since I kind of got back into it. It's been kind of dead, so it's good to see some community and some chat, and it gives me energy as well. When nobody's talking, it's just kind of like, I do feel kind of a little bit like, okay, my tiredness is arising. But when there's people, I get the energy. So it's good to see everybody here with me tonight. All right, so let's read a sutta. Hello, Anthony. Hope you're doing well, my friend. Wait a second. Why do I have this on Horner? What? There we go. That's better. All right. The shorter discourse on taking up practices. Chula Dhamma Sammadana Sutta. There's a shorter and a longer. So depending on how long these two take, the first one takes, maybe we'll do both, because they're both not that long. Even for Majjhima Nikaya length, they're not that long. All right. So I have heard at one time the Buddha was staying near Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's monastery. There the Buddha addressed the mendicants. Mendicants, venerable sir, they replied. The Buddha said this. Mendicants, there are these 4 ways of taking up practices. What 4? There is a way of taking a practice that is pleasant now but results in future pain. There is a way of taking a practice that is painful now and results in future pain. There is a way of taking a practice that is painful now but results in future pleasure. And there is a way of taking a practice that is pleasant now and results in future pleasure. I think I know that. I think I know exactly what the last one is, at least. Actually, I know what the last two are, because I've seen this. This is a framework that I'm familiar with because I identify myself with the third one. Painful now, but future pleasure. I could be wrong. I'm gonna see if see if my intuition on what this is right. But let's keep going on. Uh, and what is the way of taking a practice that is pleasant now, but goes to future pain, results in future pain? There are some ascetics and Brahmins who have this doctrine in view. There's nothing wrong with sensual pleasures. They throw themselves into sensual pleasures, like hedonists, cavorting with female wanderers with fancy hairdos. They say, what future danger do those ascetics and Brahmins see in sensual pleasures, that they speak of giving up sensual pleasures and advocate the complete understanding of sensual pleasure? Pleasant is the touch of this female wanderer's arm, tender, soft, and downy, and they throw themselves into sensual pleasures. So one of the things that this points out is that these are ascetics, right? So these are fellow samanas. So what this shows you is, so people tend to think, well, we understand, right? The samana tradition, the people who checked out of the regular society to go into the woods to seek enlightenment, but not all, right? So we see like the samana tradition is this kind of like petri dish, this petri dish of tests, of where Jainism came out of that, Buddhism came out of that, all kinds of different things came out of that. And we see so many of these different things in the suttas. And we see one example here. Sensual pleasures are great. Let's just enjoy them. Don't worry about it. When their body breaks up after death, they're reborn in a place of loss, a bad place, the underworld, hell. And there they feel painful, sharp, severe, acute feelings. They say, this is that future danger that those ascetics and Brahmins saw. For it is because of sensual pleasures I'm feeling painful, sharp, severe, acute feelings. And again, this is not talking about like the example. This is not like, like you have a wife or your husband and you enjoy, sexual pleasure with them. And, this is not like, you enjoy some sensual pleasure and you go to hell. What this is pointing out is that if you're living this life of kind of abandon, where you're not really reflecting, well, then you're going to want those sensual pleasures. But what happens? The sensual pleasures go away. You get separated from them, right? So you keep clinging, grasping, going after them, and in doing so, you cause suffering to yourself and harm to others. That is what is leading you to hell. So it's very important that this is understood. Suppose that in the last month of summer, a camel's foot creeper pod were to burst open and seed were to fall at the root of the sal tree. Then the deity haunting that sal tree would become apprehensive and nervous, but their friends and colleagues, relatives and kin, deities of the park, forest trees, and those who haunt the herbs, grass, and big trees would come together and reassure them, do not fear, sir, do not fear. So this is the creeper. The creeper is the vine that wraps around the tree and eventually kills it. Right? So a deva is living in a nice tree. It's their nice tree home. And now the beginning of the creeper starts. And so he starts to worry. But everybody's saying, nah, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It's okay. It's all good. No worries. Do not fear, sir. Do not fear. Hopefully that seed will be swallowed by a peacock, or eaten by a deer, or burnt by a forest fire, or picked up by a lumberjack, or eaten by termites, or it may not even be fertile. But none of these things happened, and the seed was fertile, so that when the clouds soaked it with rain, it sprouted, and the creeper wound its tender, soft, and downy tendrils around the sal tree. Then the deity thought, what future danger did my friends see when they said, do not fear, sir, do not fear. Hopefully that seed will be swallowed by a peacock, or eaten by a deer, or burnt by a forest fire, or picked up by a lumberjack, or eaten by termites, or it may not even be fertile. Pleasant is the touch of this creeper's tender, soft, and downy tendrils. Then the creeper enfolded the sal tree, made a canopy over it, draped it a curtain around it, and split apart all the main branches. Then the deity thought, this future danger that my friend saw, it's become that of the camel's foot creeper seed that I am feeling. Because of that I am feeling painful, sharp, severe, acute feelings. You see this in a couple different places where the tree being harmed hurts the deva living in the tree. In the same way, there are some ascetics and Brahmins who have this doctrine of view. There's nothing wrong with sensual pleasures. This is called the way of taking a practice that is pleasant now but result in future pain. And what is the way of taking a practice that is painful now and results in future pain? It's when somebody goes naked, ignoring conventions. So this is like all the very ascetic practices that the Buddha tried before he, gave up those ascetic practices for the middle way. Okay. Goes naked, ignoring conventions. They lick their hands and don't come or wait when called. They don't consent to food brought to them or food prepared on purpose for them or an invitation for a meal. They don't receive anything from a pot or bowl or from someone who keeps sheep or who has a weapon or a shovel in their home, or where a couple is eating, or where there is a woman who is pregnant, breastfeeding, or who has a man in her home, or where there's a dog waiting or flies buzzing. They accept no fish or meat or liquor or wine or drink no beer. They go to just one house for alms, taking just one mouthful, or 2 houses and 2 mouthfuls, up to 7 houses and 7 mouthfuls. They feed on 1 saucer a day, 2 saucers a day, or up to 7 saucers a day. They eat once a day, once every second day, once a week, and so on, even up to once a fortnight, every 2 weeks. They live committed to the practice of eating food at set intervals. They eat herbs, millet, wild rice, poor rice, water lettuce, rice bran, scum from boiling rice, sesame flour, grass, or cow dung. They survive on forest roots and fruits, or eating fallen fruits. They wear robes of sun hemp, mixed hemp, coarse wrapping cloth, rags, low tree bark, antelope hide, whole or in strips, kusa grass, bark, wood chips, human hair, horse tail hair, or owl's wigs. They tear out their hair and beard, committed to this practice. They stand forever, refusing seat. You ever see like documentaries or videos about India where they show the ascetics and you'll see like one ascetic who has made the practice of keeping their arm up and their arm solidifies there. Like they keep it up so much that it literally calcifies, right? Or they're sleeping on beds of nails or something like that. You can still see a lot of these practices in India even to this day. They stand forever, refusing seats. They squat, committed to persisting in the squatting position. They lay on a mat of thorns, mat of nails, making a mat of thorns their bed. They're committed to the practice of immersion in water 3 times a day, including the evening. They bathe more than most people in modern day, even. And so they live committed to practicing these various ways of mortifying and tormenting the body. When their body breaks up after death, they're reborn in a place of loss, a bad place, the underworld, hell. This is called the way of taking up practices that is painful now and results in future pain. And what is the way of taking up practices that is painful now but results in future pleasure? It's when somebody is ordinarily full of acute greed, hate, and delusion. They often feel pain and sadness that greed and hate and delusion bring. They lead the full and pure spiritual life in pain and sadness, sweeping their tearful faces. When their body breaks up after death, they're reborn in a good place, a heavenly realm. This is called the way of taking up the practices that is painful now, but results in future pleasures. So this is important to understand as well. This is somebody who maybe they're even a monastic. Could be a lay person too, but a monastic, and they're dedicated to living the holy life, the practice. They follow the Noble Eightfold Path, but it's horrible and miserable, and they suffer, but they persist in it and they keep doing it. That leads to a good destination, and of course, eventually towards awakening. Right. So, even this kind of from Gayatri's question, right? Even when it's tough and it's horrible and it's worse, keep practicing. It leads to a good destination. This is called the way of taking a practices that is painful now but results in future pleasure. And what is the way of taking a practices that is pleasant now and results in future pleasure? It's when somebody is not ordinarily full of greed, hate, and delusion. They rarely feel the pain and sadness that greed, hate, and delusion bring. So they're practicing lots of good Dhamma and jhanas. This is the anytime you like. There's a sutta where the Buddha talks about, basically like there's the hard way and the long way, and then there's the short. No, there's the long, no, the hard unpleasant way, and the short pleasant way. The hard unpleasant way of becoming of developing the insight is straight mindfulness, a subha practice, etc. The easy pleasant way is jhana, and so we see the same thing here, right? They have a pleasant experience and it leads to future pleasant. Quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unskillful qualities, they enter or remain in the first jhana, second, third, fourth jhana. When the body breaks up after death, they're reborn in a good place, a heavenly realm. That is called the way of taking up practices that is pleasant now and results in future pleasure. These are the 4 ways of taking up practices. This is what the Buddha said. Satisfied, the mendicants approved of what the Buddha said. Sadhu. All right. So I think now is a good time for meditation. So we'll do our half-hour meditation, and then we'll do some readings of the Dhammapada and close out after that. All right, friends. So set yourself up in whatever comfortable and stable position works for you. We'll start by doing a scan of the body, placing our focus and attention on the feet, slowly moving up to the head, focusing in on whatever feeling or sensation that arises in each part of the body as we move through it. This is a good mindfulness practice, and it's also a way of understanding the body and the postures so that we can sit for longer periods of time with less pain and suffering. So place your focus on the feet. Focusing in on whatever sensation that's there, perhaps the feeling of the feet pressing against the floor, the cushion, the opposite leg, etc. Moving up through the ankles into the calves. Through the knees and into the thighs. Up to the hips and pelvis. Pay close attention to this part of your body as the position of the pelvis impacts the lower body and also the spine as we move up. When you're ready, slowly move up the spine through the abdomen and the chest, checking that the spine is not leaning or slouching here or there, nor that you're trying to make the spine very straight, forcing yourself up. Both of these will eventually cause some level of back pain and discomfort. Try to do your best to allow the spine to rest comfortably in its natural curvature. Even if you're sitting in a chair, try not to lean too far back, slouching, putting too much weight on the back of the chair. This can also impact your ability to have full, unrestricted breath. That's another reason for good posture, allowing the body to breathe without any encumbrance. Up to the shoulders, checking that they're hanging loosely, not scrunched up and tight. And down through to the elbows and hands. Observing how the position of the elbows and hands also impacts your spine and your posture. And finally up to the head. Checking that the head is not leaning or slouching here or there. When you're done setting up your body in a comfortable and stable position, let the body go and take 3 deep breaths. And then let the breath go. From here on in, try not to manipulate or control the breath in any way. Remember, this body's been breathing since you were born. Doesn't need you to do its job. Observe, investigate, and abide with the breath. Remember when you get distracted away from the breath, acknowledge you've become distracted. Practice letting go of the distraction by neither getting agitated and pushing it away, nor by continuing to be excited and attaching to it. Try to let it go, let it be. Give it no energy, attention, or focus. Let it go on its way and return to the breath. So, whenever you're distracted away, acknowledge, let go, and return. Acknowledge, let go, and return. Always come back to the breath. It's always there, doing its thing, ready for you to follow it towards a more calm and tranquil mind. Acknowledge, let go, and return. Every once in a while, check in with the state of your mind. Is your mind becoming more calm and tranquil or not? As it does, you may begin to notice more subtle, deeper characteristics of the breath. Sometimes the breath is long and deep, sometimes short and shallow. Do your best to observe and understand the breath at ever more deeper and subtle levels. Observe the impermanence, the anicca in the breath and the body breathing. Slowly open your eyes, becoming aware of the room around you, the live stream, reflecting on the state of your mind before and after the meditation, and any experiences you may have had, contemplating those. As we begin our Dhammapada readings. Hello, Malika from Down Under. Always good to see our Australian friends. We are starting an hour early these days. So if you, instead of, I guess it's probably 10 a.m. or 10 something, 10:30 for you, we start at 9 instead of 10 like we used to do, at least for now. But let's read some Dhammapada. The monk. Good is restraint over the eye. Good is restraint over the ear. Good is restraint over the nose. Good is restraint over the tongue. Good is restraint in the body. Good is restraint in speech. Good is restraint in thought. Restraint everywhere is good. The monk restrained in every way is freed from all suffering. He who has control over his hands, feet, and tongue, who is fully controlled, delights in inward development, is absorbed in meditation, keeps to himself and is contented. Him do people call a monk. That monk who has control over his tongue is moderate in speech, unassuming, and who explains the teaching both in letter and spirit. Whatever he says is pleasing. A monk who abides in the Dhamma, delights in the Dhamma, meditates on the Dhamma, and bears the Dhamma well in mind. He does not fall away from the sublime Dhamma. One should not despise what one has received, nor envy the gains of others. The monk who envies the gains of others does not attain to meditative absorption. A monk who does not despise what he has received, even though it be little, who is pure in livelihood and unremitting in effort, him even the gods praise. He who has no attachment whatsoever for the mind and the body, who does not grieve for what he has not, he is truly called a monk. The monk who abides in universal love and is deeply devoted to the teaching of the Buddha attains the peace of Nibbana, the bliss of the cessation of all conditioned things. Empty is the boat, O monk. Emptied, it will sail lightly. Rid of lust and hatred, you shall reach Nibbana. Cut off the five, abandon the five, and cultivate the five. The monk who has overcome the five bonds is called one who has crossed the flood. Meditate, O monk, do not be heedless. Let not your mind whirl on sense pleasures. Heedless, do not swallow a red-hot iron ball. Let your cry when burning, lest you cry when burning. Oh, this is painful. There is no meditative concentration for him who lacks insight. I lost where we were. Okay. There's no meditative concentration for him who lacks insight. and no insight for him who lacks meditative concentration. He in whom are found both meditative concentration and insight, indeed is close to Nibbana. If you've been around Bhante Ji, if you've ever meditated at a retreat with Bhante Ji, this is usually what he ends meditations with. It took me a little bit to recognize that because of the different translation. The monk who has retired to a solitary abode and calmed his mind, who comprehends the Dhamma with insight, in him there arises a delight that transcends all human delights. Whenever he sees with insight the rise and fall of the aggregates, he is full of joy and happiness. To the discerning one, this reflects the deathless. Control of the senses, contentment, restraint according to the code of the monastic discipline. These form the basis of the holy life here for the wise monk. Let him associate with friends who are noble, energetic, and pure in life. Let him be cordial and refined in conduct. Thus full of joy, he will make an end of suffering. Just as the jasmine creeper sheds its withered flowers, even so, O monks, should you totally shed lust and hatred. The monk who is calm in body, calm in speech, calm in thought, well composed, and who has spewed out worldliness, he truly is called serene. By oneself must one censure oneself and scrutinize oneself. The self-guarded and mindful monk will always live in happiness. One is one's own protector, one is one's own refuge. Therefore, one should control oneself, even as a trader controls a noble steed. Full of joy, full of faith in the teachings of the Buddha, the monk attains the peaceful state, the bliss of cessation of conditioned things. That monk who, while young, devotes himself to the teachings of the Buddha, illumines this world like the moon freed from the clouds. All right, friends. So, Dallas is still with us. Very good. Maybe because it's a bit earlier. Yankee and Rick, hello. Sorry to say that we are coming to the end, really, because we have been starting at 7. We've been starting an hour early. So if you can make it an hour early to start Dhammapalooza earlier, that would be good. At least for a while, we're testing out this new time. Hello, Misty Moon. That's a name I'm not familiar with. So is this your first time, or are you somebody we know from the Discord and other places, just using your YouTube account? Oh, you met me at Karuna Buddhist Vihara. All right. Well, nice to see you again then. Monday night at now 7 p.m. Eastern. So it would be 4 in California. We have our 2-hour Festival of Dhamma. that we are coming to the end. We're wrapping up now. We did our question and answer. We did our sutta reading. We did our meditation. And now we just finished our Dhammapada. We do have a few minutes. If anybody has a question they'd like it, I can stay for a little bit longer. Um, Usually by this time after the meditation, almost everybody's gone and it's time to close. But because of the time change, I think we had people join um, towards the end. Oh, Rick, I hope that you feel better soon. All right. So why don't we do our final business before we share merit in closing out? So, friends, those of you who are joining us for the first time, those of you who might be watching this later, if this is your first time watching this video, then I want to give you some information. The first is the website. The website for myself and the organization that I'm building, Maggasekha. If you're like this video and you like to be able to be notified about various activities, virtual retreats. I have a retreat coming up in 2 weeks, a Zoom weekend retreat, articles, videos, etc. If you'd like to be kept up to date on all the activities regarding myself and Maggasekha, you can go to the website on the scroll below, maggasekha.org, maggasekha.org. And there you can, on the top right-hand side, you can put your email in, and every time I post an announcement, you will get an email about that announcement. Same thing on YouTube. If you're coming to this YouTube channel for the first time, you can click subscribe, click the bell, all notifications, and then anytime something comes up, a new stream, a new video, etc., then you can get notified in that. In terms of activities, Monday nights, and all activities are subject to me being in a place that has internet and me being able to do it at that place. As a nomad monk, that means that sometimes that's not the case. But for the good next couple of months at least, we'll be able to be on schedule. So that means Monday night Dhammapaloozas, 7 p.m. New York time for now. Then we have Saturday, if you're on Insight Timer. I'm a teacher on Insight Timer, and I do an 1.5-hour session, Dhamma session, meditation, Dhamma talk, and Q&A Saturdays at 3 p.m. on Insight Timer. Then we also have our online Discord community, Maggasekha Discord community, where we do a variety of different things. But the main event is every Sunday at 7 p.m. New York time. We read suttas together. We've been reading suttas together for over 7 years now. We've got through a good chunk of Nikayas, multiple Nikayas actually. And so the Maggasekha Discord community is available for those who'd like to join. It is a community that is based in the early texts, both in study and in practice. So it's a very specific Buddhist community. It's not really a general Buddhist community. But if the suttas are something that you're very interested in, you don't have to be Theravada. We have people join from Mahayana and things like that. Because everybody can learn the suttas. The suttas, the early texts, are the heritage of all Buddhists, not just one tradition. So anybody who is interested in learning and studying from the perspective of the early texts, you're welcome to join us to check it out. If you'd like to check out the community, you can send an email to the email listed on the screen, maggasekha@gmail.com, and ask for an invite, and we'll send you an invite. Okay, friends. And so also in terms of other activities, I've gotten out of the habit of it because due to energy and to being in different places, but I'm going to try to get back to the habit of doing a Wednesday Ask a Bhante video. So if you have questions you'd like me to answer in a video, you can send them to me in email or private message or whatever, and I can answer that question in a video for the channel, so for yourself and for future people who might want to have that question. And also Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. New York time for a half hour, we have what's called Morning Monastery Experience. This is giving a layperson in the world a little experience, a little glimpse of a morning session at a Buddhist monastery. This includes the precepts, some chanting, listening to some Dhamma teaching. It's a good half-hour start of the day, and it's a really neat small group of people. About 7 to 10 of us every morning who've been very dedicated in doing this in the morning. It's very nice. Everybody says hello to each other, and we do the practice together. It's quite nice. So if you are thinking that's interesting or want to check that out, you can check for the streams that go live on the channel 8 a.m. Monday through Friday. We will have Morning Monastery Experience tomorrow morning, as long as I'm alive. We will go live tomorrow at 8, so in about 11 hours. All right, friends, let's do our sharing of merit. Where are you? There you are. Okay. All right. Dukkha patta chane dukkha, bhaya patta chane bhaya, sukha patta chane sukha, hontu sabbe pipaniyo, etavata cha mehi sampatang punya sampatang, sabbe deva anumodantu sabba sampatti sittiga, akasata jabumata deva naga mahiddika, punyang tang anumoditva, charang rakantu sasanang. May the suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit of ours for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas, nagas, and yakas of mighty power, share this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddhist dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. All right, friends, that is the end of another Dhammapalooza. This is a very energetic and lively communal Dhammapalooza today. It's been the first in a little while. So I was happy to see that. And so, friends, Sukhi Hotu, may you be well and at ease, practice well and be well, and may you have a spiritually successful and peaceful practice until we meet again. Have a good night.